All right, we're recording. All right, so on the podcast today, I have Joseph Miller, or Mr. Miller, as some people might know him from Lincoln Way. And You have a blog. What? Send me the link to the blog too, because I'll put it on the video for YouTube, and then someone can follow that too to check out that. And then I just I'm just connected with you on Facebook, so I see the stuff that you post on there.
Well, all they have to do to search my the one where I keep my writing,
Yeah.
it's called J Miller's Excerpts, EXCERPTS, J Miller's Excerpts. All you have to do is Google that, and they can look it up, and I have everything there. What they should be looking at is for our particular purposes. It's called the timeline of the. Let me get the specific post up here. It's called Timeline of the Coronavirus Pandemic and the U.S. Response to it.
Right. And that was what I saw, and then figured that I'd like to talk to you about that. I know that you had some people that commented that they wanted you to add this or that to it or something like that. I don't know if you made any revisions and posted a while back to it since then. Has anyone else commented?
Not really. I've gotten a lot of page views
Right.
On this. I have over 7,300 page views now on this.
Yeah.
So it is in a small way starting to viralize. I'd like to encourage that to get bigger. I think it has an important message. I think there's a lot of really disturbing evidence I've been able to glean. What I did is I took the wording from the original sources and I just kept it as much as humanly possible. I didn't want to throw in a lot of my own editorial comment or anything. I just decided to let the sources speak for themselves, and it's pretty damning.
Right. So I'm gonna have you just go through it, because it is, and then I always I do the podcast, and people kind of know that I'm pretty liberal, and on some things, I'm not. We had a conversation on the phone, and I'm just not a normal. I really can't put in a box. I've got guns. I grew up hunting, all that kind of stuff, and but socially, I'm completely liberal. Just I don't, everyone should do whatever they want to do, and as long as it's not hurting anybody else, then that's not my problem. You know what I mean?
That's pretty much where I am.
Right. If you're a homosexual or transgender person, or you should have, you're a human being, you should have every single right that anybody else does, no matter what your race or lifestyle or religion. None of that stuff should matter. There's good people and bad people in all that. So I don't see how people can discriminate, and I don't know. It's a weird thing. The racism thing since the Trump presidency has definitely been magnified and
definitely
illuminated, for sure. As far as it's brought people out of the shadows that are letting that racist flag fly, which I've got a weird feeling on that too. I'm cool with it. If you're going to be a racist, then be a racist. Don't act like you're not. Don't act like it's normal or whatever like that. Just be that person. Let everyone know who you are. It's like the Inglourious Bastards thing where they carved the swastika on the guy's forehead. I want to know who you are. I want you to be out there in the open. So anyways, so go ahead and fill me in on the timeline for the response, and then I'll try and chirp in, because I followed it pretty good as we went.
I've added a couple of things since you perhaps saw it.
Okay.
But the timeline begins all the way back in 2005 with President George W. Bush very responsibly, very intelligently telling his team they need to start planning for a possible pandemic in the United States. And it was very prescient on his part to do that. And then in November of 2014, President Obama, because the U.S. was dealing with the Ebola situation, which Obama handled brilliantly, by the way.
Right.
He requested additional funding to build up and replenish stockpiles of emergency equipment, and the Republican House of Representatives turned him down on that and said, well, we don't need to do that. You know, it's not necessary to build up such a stockpile, such equipment. And they turned him down, which in retrospect was a really, really destructive and foolish move. The Obama administration, Obama warned in December of 2014 that a pandemic, a flu pandemic is what he was referring to, was quite possible. His administration continued to take steps to prepare for such a pandemic. They gave the Trump administration a specific playbook, 70 pages long, on what to do.
Yeah, the problem is the book part, right?
Yeah. Certain people never crack those things.
Right.
They also held briefings with Trump's transition team on what to do. You know, how they gamed out a pandemic situation with them. They left quite a bit for them. There was also an office that had been established to deal with pandemics. They even had an office in China specifically to catch disease organisms coming out of China, to get kind of an early warning system on that. So they were very, very thorough in their preparations for this. And my timeline demonstrates that these preparations were ignored or dismantled. Pretty appalling.
Right. But it seemed like the MO of the entire administration was somehow to, again, like, you know, I'm not the normal liberal that, like, or you know, I shouldn't say liberal, but the liberal is not a bad word, and I'm tired of people making it so. Yeah. I'm not your normal Democrat who, this drives me nuts about Democrats, that everything is either sexist or racist. Every time someone doesn't agree, they're sexist or racist. And that's bullshit. Yes. Some people just don't agree. They're just raised differently. It's just, whatever it is, they're selfish, whatever the problem is, but they just don't agree. And it's not a racism thing. But I do believe in this situation, it's a situation where this administration would like to literally erase everything because they felt like the black president was, you know, illegitimate. The whole birther thing and everything else was all a racist, you know.
It's part of Trump's personal psychological sickness.
Right.
He hates Barack Obama. He hates everything about him. He's simply determined to destroy everything associated with him.
Right.
And this is all out of personal pique. It has nothing to do with any specific policy. It's all personal animosity. That's all it is.
Right. And it's a situation where he's doing it with napalm. He's not doing it with a scalpel where he's taking out anything that's negative and putting in things that are positive. You know what I mean? Like, he's not adding to anything. He's just, you know, wiping it all out. Hey, did you just switch chairs? Okay. All right. Sorry. Go ahead. So right. He's wiping everything out, and it's, you know, it's obviously not good. And this is illuminating that situation also.
Well, if you take a couple of specific things that they did along these lines, in February of 2018, the Trump administration was proposing cutting the CDC by 80%. In other words, their efforts to prevent global disease outbreak. I don't know that went through. I don't think it went through, but that shows how limited they were in their thinking. Right. That they at least wanted to make the attempt. And then, pardon me, in May of 2018, John Bolton dismantled the National Security Council's Global Health Security Office and cut it back severely in an incredibly foolish and short-sighted move, incredibly short-sighted. And the entire National Security Council's Global Health Security Unit, in effect, was shut down. And this is an appalling thing to do. In July of 2019, I'll just read this to you and let you react to it. Trump eliminated a key American public health position in Beijing, intended to help detect disease outbreaks in China, leaving the US without an observer on the ground in the most likely spot in the world to spark a global pandemic.
Right. Which is right. It's, you know, like I said, I think it's napalm. I think he just is anything that has to do with past administrations or whatever like that. And then you have the added, he gave $1 trillion worth of tax cuts to very wealthy people, and somehow he's got to pay for that. So he's trying to cut nickels and dimes to make up $1 trillion, which is, you know, math is not his strong suit. So it's, you know, it's not going to work out.
And this is something that's also appalling from September of 2019. The U.S. curtailed an agency that had been operating through the Agency for International Development. It was called, the initiative was called PREDICT, and it was designed to predict the emergence of diseases. And there was a PREDICT office specifically assigned to Wuhan, to the laboratory in Wuhan. I mean, how much more specific can it get?
Right.
And the funding ran out in September of 2019, and the PREDICT program laid off dozens of scientists and analysts. And this is the same month that the White House's own economist said that a pandemic disease could kill 500,000 Americans and devastate the economy. This is September of 2019.
Right.
It's as if they're doing every single thing possible to sabotage a response.
Right. So every time that guy gets on a presser and says nobody saw this coming, it's a lie 10 times over, because everybody saw it coming.
It's a complete lie. It's a complete and absolute lie. The dismantling of the office in China, the shutting down of the PREDICT program was just catastrophic.
Mm-hmm.
And we know, for example, and another thing that really aggravates me is that Trump attempting to say that he didn't know any of this was happening. We have evidence that as early as November of 2019, there were intel officers briefing the White House on what they called an unknown pathogen in China. They didn't know what it was, but they knew it was serious enough to send a warning to the Israeli government that this was coming from China.
Right.
China's behavior has, by the way, been absolutely abysmal in this whole thing.
Sure. I mean, their behavior has, but from what I understand of their culture, they're what's considered a tight culture. So like they, you know, when the government says you got to stay in your house, you got, you know, you have to do this, you have to do that, the people listen. Where we're a loose culture and we rebel against everything the government says to do.
Well, the government in China is authoritarian, and they can enforce these things.
Yes.
And China lied to us about the extent of what was going on. They lied to us about the severity of it. But the point is that our intelligence people figured that out. They figured out that China was trying to deceive us. There were briefings again in December of 2019, and Dr. Robert Redfield, who's the head of the CDC in the United States, spent all of New Year's Day on the phone with his counterpart from China, and he was shook by what he heard. He was shook, and the very next day, the CDC got in contact with the National Security Council to say that there's a pathogen coming out of China. We don't know what it is yet, but it sounds pretty bad.
Right.
We have the evidence, and as early as January 3rd, the White House got its first notification about the coronavirus. And the spy agencies began signaling the seriousness of this within a few days.
Right.
Yeah. So the intelligence agencies issued a number of warnings. Now in January and February of 2020, no fewer, I believe, than 8 different times. The presidential daily brief, you know, the little intel summary the president gets every day. At
Right.
least 8 times this popped up. There were warnings that were given, repeated warnings were given about this. They said that China is suppressing information about the contagions, transmissibility, and its death toll. And the point is, though, that, yeah, they're lying, but we know they're lying. And this is
Right.
something very serious coming at us, and you better do something about this.
Yeah. So it's negligence on a whole other level.
It really is. Now, on the 7th of January, the CDC established a coronavirus management system. So they're beginning to suspect that it is a coronavirus, which is not a flu. A lot of people get the idea that it's kind of like a flu virus. It's not. It's genetically different. There's a whole category of these things.
Right. Right. So I had heard that there was some mutation that it had taken on just recently, that now that the new mutation is more contagious than the original one.
Well, I hear different things about that. I've seen that item as well, that there's a new mutation of it. Others are saying that the mutation isn't drastic enough to alter the main course of the virus. I don't know. I think it's still being determined. We do know that on either January 10th or 11th, that China published the genome of the coronavirus. Now, by chance, South Korea was already working in this field. They were already working and analyzing this field. And when it was announced, the South Koreans just jumped right on this. Now, on January 11th, the CDC issued a level 1 travel health notice for Wuhan, China, which warning people not to go. And then the whole genome sequence was in our hands by the 12th of January. And
that's pretty early.
I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, they do know this. The World Health Organization contacted the U.S. CDC and said, look, we can give you a coronavirus test we've developed. It was not, however, there were deficiencies in it. There were things wrong with it. And the US decided to try to develop its own test.
Right.
But they wouldn't go to any of the private labs that were working on this test. And they were actually hampering the ability of private labs to develop it. It's just unbelievable.
Right. When then, you know, like the circus that went on when it really broke, it was just an effort to make the numbers look better, or
exactly
put a projection out there that was so high that Trump figured they'd never meet that projection, but it looks like we're going to meet that projection anyway.
Yes. And well, on January 18th, this is January 18th, the Azar called Trump to warn him about the coronavirus. And this is January 18th. And before he could get a word in, Trump interjected to berate him over the issue of vaping. He'd been thinking about vaping and says, why aren't you doing anything about vaping?
Right.
It's unbelievable. 2 days later, by the way, the first confirmed cases of COVID-19 that we know of popped up in South Korea and the United States on the same day. And it's very important that we remember that. That happened on the same day.
Okay.
Today, South Korea's death toll is under 300. Ours just passed 85,000.
Right. Now, do you know offhand what South Korea's population is?
The population of South Korea is about 1/6 the size of the United States.
So still pretty big. I mean, that's still 50 million people or better.
But it's just our death rate is something over 200 times. We have 6 times as many people. We have 200 times as many dead.
Right. Yeah, 300 is now. I know that we trust South Korea as far as like them reporting the right numbers, where we don't trust China as reporting the correct numbers.
Well, we don't trust China on the correct numbers. China's death toll could easily be 15 or 20 times greater than they've admitted. The
Right.
Chinese did take very drastic measures to shut down Wuhan and the entire Hubei province that Wuhan is in. They shut down much of the country. They sprayed public streets. But I have a feeling that the death toll in China is much higher than is reported. The Chinese, as I said, have just lied about this. And they have tried to intimidate anybody who tried to report accurately on this, even threatening retaliation against Australia, threatening against Europe. Like I said, the Chinese government has just behaved atrociously in this. But nonetheless, we can't use that as an excuse. Now, I want to read a quote on January 22nd from Trump. He said, somebody asked, are there worries about a pandemic at this point? Okay, a person from CNBC asked him that. Trump said, quote, no, not at all. And we have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China and we have it under control. It's going to be just fine.
Right.
Unquote.
Which is reminiscent of the, Doctors Without Borders that were coming back with Ebola and the Obama administration, where I think there was like 2 of them or something like that. And we did have it under control in that situation. Now, just to put it on, apples to apples, Ebola is far less infectious, but
Yes.
far more deadly. So
far more deadly. And there's an organization that keeps all of Trump's tweets.
Yeah.
And
right.
in 2014, Trump was saying that Obama should resign over his handling of the Ebola situation. There were two Americans, that
Right.
died of Ebola. And he said that was sufficient, that Obama needs to resign because of this.
Right.
Well, it's just unbelievable. Here's a quote, another quote on the 22nd of January. One of the many great things about the trade deal we just signed with China is that it will bring both the USA and China closer together in so many ways. He said, terrific working with President Xi, a man who truly loves his country. 24th, he says, China has been working very hard to contain the coronavirus. The United States greatly appreciates their efforts and transparency.
Right.
Transparency. It will all work out well. In particular, on behalf of the American people, I want to thank President Xi. Unreal.
Right. No, yeah, he's a colossal ass kisser, that guy. I mean, Trump, as far as that goes, like he does crazy, and he I don't know what the deal is with that either. Where he kisses Kim Jong-un's ass and Xi's at, like anyone who's Putin, all those people, like for some reason, he just reminds me of a guy that just wants love from wherever he can get it. Like,
well, he's an authoritarian too. He thinks he's a tough guy.
Oh yeah, no, he's not a tough guy. Actually.
I've known I'm not a tough guy either. I've known my share of tough guys in my life,
right.
And he ain't one of them.
No.
Okay. Now, on the 27th of January, Trump says, we are in very close communication with China. Very few cases reported in USA. We have offered China and President Xi any help necessary. And there's, within the White House itself, the medical officials are beginning to show real worry about this and starting to send memos to each other about how dangerous this is. Even the head of his economic office, Peter Navarro, on the 29th of January was warning this could kill 500,000 of us.
Right.
And it could cost trillions of dollars in economic losses. Alex Azar on the 30th warns Trump personally of the possibility of a pandemic.
Right, this is the 30th of January.
Yeah, this is January 30th.
Right.
the same day that Trump says, quote, we have it very well under control. We have very little problem in this country this moment. 5. That's what he cited, the number 5. And those people are all recuperating successfully.
Right.
We're working very closely with China and other countries, and we think it's going to have a very good ending for us. That I can assure you. It's just, I look at these things and I'm just in disbelief. What reality is he in?
No, and I mean, so like I never try and like when I've had plenty of discussions with, people that are like really, 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 how to put it, like, they think Trump is the end of the republic as far as things go. So it's like dire that this guy has to go and everything like this. And, we never try and like get people who are Trump supporters to, change their mind. Like that's a futile enterprise. It's just not, that's you can't even get them to listen to actual facts or anything.
No,
like
you can't.
So, and that's fine. I mean, everyone's got their own thing. Do your own thing, however it goes. I feel reassured when, when he loses the popular vote by 3 million votes. That reassures me that at least there's more people that didn't vote for the guy. Now, granted, the system is rigged where Republicans still win elections that way, but at least that's going on. And then hopefully this time, he loses by more votes, enough to keep him, from winning again. If I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but like I just had Laura Hartman on, and she is 100% certain that they are going to cancel or delay the election in November.
Yeah, they don't have the constitutional authority to do that. But when Jared Kushner is asked, and he says, well, that's not my plan now. That's not what I anticipate. He doesn't have any say in that. Why would he even? I get the same fear too, but it would be very difficult.
So, I mean, it didn't seem like Mitch McConnell had the constitutional right to block Merrick Garland, and he did.
Oh yeah, I mean, McConnell totally disregards all norms and all laws to get whatever he wants. Now, this is something that's interesting because on the 31st of January, Trump initiates his famous travel ban, but it's not really that.
Well, because we shorten everything nowadays, and it was a travel ban on Chinese nationals.
Nationals, but not. There were 40,000 Americans.
Well, I think it's more than that now.
Well, that way, I mean, at the time, in January, February, there were 40,000 Americans that came back from China.
Right, but somehow in the fake patriot mind, if you're an American, then somehow you're different. You can't. A virus doesn't want to be in you. I don't know what it is, but they think that's somehow different. Now, if you're an American citizen, like I'm on the fence there. I don't know if, should you have come back and been in quarantine? Probably.
Yeah, exactly.
40,000 people should have came back and been isolated, and then we could have done something about this. But the optics was all he was interested in. So it said travel ban from China. Look what a good thing I did. And then we didn't pay attention to the details about what was actually happening.
I've seen it called the Swiss cheese travel ban because there were so many holes in it, so many exceptions. And I would point out from the time they first learned of a possible pandemic, I guess in November, all the way to end of January, something like 400,000 people came in from China. It's just ridiculous.
Right.
The whole argument that they shut down travel between the U.S. and China is just an outright lie.
Yeah. Besides that, once the virus is here, shutting down travel, you're just putting fingers and holes in a boat that's got tons of holes in it, and something making more holes. The virus is being transmitted from person to person here already. So stopping people from coming from a country, you need to you could do more by trying to screen the people and find out contact tracing and stuff like that.
Yes.
Now, I don't know where you fall on that either. For me, as a guy that wants my freedom and I want my liberties, I have a hard time with the whole, like, I know they're tracking me already, right? I'm walking around with a supercomputer in my pocket, and they're saying that they have the data on where people are moving around, and they're moving around more this month than they were last month because they're tracking you on your phone. So I don't know how I feel about them, tracking everybody. I don't know how I feel about people being microchipped or,
I don't like it. I don't like it.
That's not really for me. But I do understand that the way that you're going to beat something like this is with science. You're going to beat it with the new technology. We have to have something that we can use as a shield that has come up since the Spanish flu 100 years ago. And as far as I'm concerned, this would be it, right? You got something that you can actually contact trace people and then dispatch a team of people to find out if you should be isolated or not. Because it's really as simple as you're in Hawaii. If I have the coronavirus, I can't give it to you because I'm not by you. So if we stop people who have it from giving it to somebody else, you can stop this virus. So I don't know. You got to come up with a way to do that without I don't have a problem with them using that technology. My problem is government never seems to give you your rights back after the emergency's over.
Yeah, and they don't tell you the extent to which they're following you. And as far as the timeline goes of this, the unreality simply continues. On February 2nd, Trump went on, Hannity's, shit show, and said, "Well, we put
that is state-run TV." And
yeah,
I
it is.
don't understand how. I mean, if you consider yourself a patriot, everything else, and we have the right to question authority, and then you watch a news network who does nothing but, like toss that guy salad constantly.
They lie for him constantly.
Yeah.
It's sickening. Well, anyway, he says, and I quote, "We pretty much shut it down coming from China. We have a tremendous relationship with China. We did shut it down, yes." And then the very next day, he got there was an unclassified briefing that came out from the US Army saying as many as 150,000 people could die of this. And so they knew it was very, very severe. He was getting official warnings. His own Health and Human Services Director, his Economic Director, the US Army, his intel people are all pleading with him that this is really serious and we need to do something. And the CDC issued its first emergency use authorization on the 4th. They began shipping test kits out on the 5th, but the test kits had a technical flaw and they didn't produce reliable results. This is where we really fell down. It's in the testing area. If we had aggressively marshaled our forces to do this, get past these technical problems and issues, if we had had the discipline to shut the country down, in my estimation, to shut the country down for 4 weeks, mass testing, mass tracing, and to have the discipline to shut the American Republic down for a month,
we could have to do it across the board.
We could have had a handle on this.
Right.
But we didn't. And it's not just Trump who was at fault for that. There were a lot of people who weren't realistic about this. But the leadership was completely absent. And there was a certain unreality, a kind of a denialism. Well, it's not going to really be that bad. How bad could it be? Now, on the 12th of February, Dr. Nancy Messonnier, the head of the CDC's National Center for Immunization, warned that the US should be prepared for the new virus to gain a foothold. So here again, I mean, this is February we're talking about. And Trump continues to say that China has it under control. We're working with China. And I think I indicated in my timeline 15 separate occasions where Trump praised China and praised President Xi specifically, and so they're doing a great job and they're cooperating with us, and we really appreciate everything they're doing. And it's really quite puzzling in some ways. Uh, Meanwhile, there's this whole thing with the Diamond Princess, you know, that cruise ship. You remember that?
I do.
And there was pretty strong evidence that they had, you know, brought in a major amount of coronavirus cases, and the Trump administration didn't want those numbers counted because
Right.
it would make us look bad. The Diamond Princess, by the way, actually came to Kauai. My wife was a shuttle driver. You know, she shuttles tourists back and forth from the harbor to like one of the local shopping areas. And she came into contact with a number of these people. And so that ship was actually here. They were in Kauai. And our local government here has shut down all cruises, has shut down everything. And when you think about Kauai, the tourist industry, we survive on that, but
Right.
we had to shut it down. And as a consequence, and the leadership here on this island has been outstanding. We have 0 deaths. We have 72,000 people. We have had no deaths here.
Right.
And that shows what can be done if the political leadership is there.
So it's 72,000 people on the one island?
On the one island, yeah.
Wow. Right.
And we have 0 deaths. I think Hawaii has a total out of 1.2 million, maybe has 10. Outstanding response. By the 3rd week of February in 2020, the administration's top public health experts concluded they should recommend to Trump a new approach that would include warning the American people of the risks and urging steps like social distancing and staying home from work. The White House decided to focus instead on messaging, on public relations, and they didn't want to take this seriously. And you see Trump in late February still saying, we have this under control, it's minimal, the impact is going to be very little, the stock market is going to be very strong. We have this very much under control, he says. We are in contact with all the relevant nations. And then the stock market starts to collapse.
Yeah, right.
And then there was the alleged travel ban with Europe that came up in late February. That was full of holes too, and it didn't include the United Kingdom and Ireland. And one of the reasons it didn't include the United Kingdom and Ireland is that there are Trump golf courses in the United Kingdom and in Ireland.
Right.
So, you know, travel from the UK was fine. Travel from Ireland was fine. Now there was some pretty stupid things said, I have to admit, not just by Trump. Nancy Pelosi at one point in February said, well, Chinatown in San Francisco is very safe and blah, blah, blah. But then she got overruled by the governor of California, who said, no, we're going to shut everything down. And that the whole Chinatown thing probably didn't have much of an impact on anybody's behavior. But there were a lot of mistakes made by people. And some of these in retrospect are just amazing.
Yeah, and I don't know so there was Cuomo had his press conference, and he was saying that there's 2 different strains of this in the U.S., and the one that's on the West Coast is different than the one that's in New York because
That's exactly right.
Okay, yeah, the air travel coming from into New York is mostly from Europe, and the air travel that's in California is mostly from China.
Yeah. And the European strain turned out to be more virulent.
Right.
And
so the mutation there. And like, I don't know what the truth is on, you know, I know that there's this rumor out there and Trump has been kind of, you know, cheerleading it that, you know, this was created in a lab.
no, there's no evidence of that. There's no evidence. Now, Nature, the scientific journal Nature, published an exhaustive article about that. I didn't understand a lot of it because it's written for physicians and people who've studied these things professionally. But the gist of it was that a genetic analysis was done. There's no evidence of any manipulated genes in this, that this is a fully natural phenomenon.
Right.
And the way that this was dealt with was just staggering. Now, on February 27th, Trump said, and I'm quoting again, "It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear." He also, that same day as a rally, says that warnings of a pandemic and concern about a pandemic and warnings that people need to be careful of a pandemic, well, this is all a hoax. This is all a hoax the Democrats are pulling, just to try to get people afraid.
You're talking about when he was at the rally, when he was
in Michigan, yeah.
And just saying all this stuff. And I mean, you know, I don't know, that whole thing there, if I look at those rallies and think they're disturbing.
I do too.
But I know people that are Trump supporters that, you know, they really feel like that's America or something. I don't know. Like, it has really become very okay to hate on anybody who's doesn't look like you.
Yeah, I know.
So, like, it's become I don't know, it's a weird, I have a completely different definition of bravery and tough guys than people do. You know, for me, a tough guy does everything he can to, even if it makes it harder on him life-wise, to protect people around him, to do things that's, you know, that are tough guy things. And these guys, it's like, it is really like there's another, it's like the human beings have mutated. And
it's like they're cosplaying almost as people.
Yeah, well, it's just a really, I got mine, Jack, kind of, like, you know, doesn't affect me. And I've watched Republicans do this forever. You know, the vice president for W, you know, was against homosexuality until his daughter turned out to be gay.
Exactly.
And then he was like the one Republican who was fully for homosexual rights. And
there was, well, in terms of this, in terms of this whole lack of taking this seriously, there were people in the administration who did take this very seriously, and they're trying to get, you know, Trump to take it seriously as well. He's afraid to take it seriously because he doesn't want bad economic numbers.
Right. You could watch that in real time when this was breaking and the stock market was diving, and I had some, you know, guy that is an intelligent guy, but he's a Republican. When the stock market was at 26,000, telling me, better buy some stocks, man, this is the time. And it obviously was not the time.
Well, yeah. And there's been also problems too. Not just with you know, the words. There's different governments and states and local governments were asking the federal government to release supplies from their stockpile. Oregon asked for 400,000 in March, 400,000 masks, the N95 masks. They only got 37,000 of them, and a lot of them were expired, and they wouldn't be suitable for surgery. New York City asked in March for 2 million masks. They only got 76,000, and all of those were expired.
Right.
It's just been a catastrophic.
But supposedly that was Obama's fault because he didn't restock the shelves.
Yeah, and that's another lie too, because, you know, he had tried to and been blocked repeatedly in trying to. They did leave a store of equipment, by the way, but this stuff, if it's not replenished, then it starts to deteriorate. And I believe it was in 2018 that they let a contract expire with a company that was keeping this stuff, was supposed to keep this stuff up to date, and nothing was done. I mean, it's just one screw up after another.
Right. So we do construction around here, and we had a box of N95 masks that we found in our shed, and they were under 3 years old, and the elastic on them was already shot.
Yeah. I mean, they do deteriorate, and we see this repeatedly. If people go through the timeline, we see this repeatedly. not only the failure to test, but the failure to organize equipment, the failure to get equipment where it was needed. And in March 8th, you still have this denying taking place that this is severe. Trump says on March 8th, they're trying to scare everybody from meetings, cancel the meetings, close the schools, destroy the country. And that's okay as long as we can win the election. He says that he said it's just disgusting. Everything is always Obama's fault.
Yes.
Well, we weren't able to get good tests because Obama impeded us. He even went so far as to castigate Obama for not having a test for a virus that had yet to evolve.
Right. Didn't exist, but there was no test. And right. No, I know. And then like the other problem is the amount of misinformation that's out there, and then people run with it. The glaring light that was shined on that was when he looked at the Dr. Deborah and said, hey, what can we talk to the doctors about looking into, getting disinfectant into the body and maybe getting a, massive, strong light shined on the body. And
I know, it's just border.
The most absurd shit in the world. And then the very next day, even that night, all of the knuckleheads were running around saying, they were like posting this type of UV light is what he was talking about. And there's this kind of disinfectant that's in vaccines. And, they were defending him at
anything
they could. And then they put a microphone in front of the buffoon the next day. And he's like, yeah, I said it, but it was sarcasm. Like he didn't say that he was talking about.
I know, and he undercuts.
Yep.
I mean, he tries to lie. He undercuts his own fan club.
And I've never seen a fan club that looks so stupid. And then when they get caught looking stupid, they don't see that they look stupid at all.
Now, one of the disastrous things that Trump did was put his idiot, incompetent son-in-law, Jared Kushner, in charge of a lot of.
I know some people that think that Jared Kushner is actually the puppet master.
Yeah, he might be. If he is, we're in trouble because he's one of the most disastrous people you can meet. He's the kind of person, Bill, who is a mediocrity and even an incompetent, but he thinks he's a genius. And this is a catastrophe because
right.
he has this totally undeserved confidence in himself. He set up a team to deal with this, and then now he's being put in charge of a team to help develop the vaccine. And Jared has no noticeable talents. He has no discernible abilities.
Right.
He has failed in every job he's been given. Now, and they today, and it just came out today, and I think you will find this perhaps shocking, but it just came out today. May 14th, the Financial Times reported that Trump didn't want to make preparations for the coronavirus pandemic. Now listen to this, because he was concerned that doing so would send the stock market into a panic.
Right. It is absolutely all about the numbers, not about the human lives. He is the first responsibility of a president is to protect his populace, and
I know.
He does not care. Did you see I know it's not the greatest source in the world, but it's actually a person that knows him. Howard Stern did a couple of interviews, and he was beyond damning. I mean, he, in the one interview, said that he would like Trump supporters to all go drink bleach and die. And ooh, that's a little bit rough. And then he did another one where he was talking about he knows Donald Trump, and he knows for a fact that the people that he hates the most are the people who love him the most.
Yeah.
And not saying that like in a psychological way, saying the demographic of the people who like him the most are the people in the world that he hates. It has nothing to do with like.
Well, he despises them. I mean, he wouldn't have anything to do. I've tried to tell people I know who are Trump supporters, this guy doesn't care about you. He couldn't care less what happens to you. He would throw you under the bus. He would sacrifice you. He doesn't care about you. And I try to explain this, but it's just, I don't know. You know how it is. It's just not possible. But I mean, this is something I want to read you too here. This is what one of the confidants, one of Trump's confidants said about Jared. Quote, Jared had been arguing that testing too many people or ordering too many ventilators would spook the markets. And so we just shouldn't do it. Yeah. That advice, he says, that advice worked far more powerfully on Trump than what the scientists were saying. He thinks the scientists always exaggerate. So he listened to Jared Kushner instead of his own scientific people.
Right, who has absolutely no knowledge of anything except for what he thinks the stock market will do because of this thing. You know, that's all super disheartening and, you know, scary as all hell as far.
Well, Kushner's an idiot. He's
right.
Like I said, he's an idiot who thinks he's a genius. He's also as crooked as anyone I've ever seen in my life. My God, his father was a crook.
Kushner's father, right, and that's not a salacious thing to say. His father went
to prison.
Right.
Yeah, went to prison, and Kushner has got so many dirty deals going on, and with the Saudis especially. But as far as like the chronology of how this happened, you have the mayor of New York City dropped the ball on preparations and guidance and things like that. And some of Bill de Blasio's own people threatened to resign if he didn't take stronger action. And I think that has to be noted as well. De Blasio kind of dropped the ball there. Andrew Cuomo, after a hesitant start, became very strong in New York in dealing with this. But they were not as fast to action as they should have been, and that needs to be said just for the record.
Yeah, for sure.
Now on March,
some of the stuff that didn't mean to interrupt you there, but some of the stuff that people that baffles me is I see, you know, open, you know, Liberate America people posting things like they're shutting down McCormick Place and they never even had any COVID patients, or they're sending the USS Compassion out of New York and it wasn't even needed. And I look at that and say, that's a raving success then, because the reason that the death rate was so high in Italy was because they became overwhelmed. They didn't have the ventilators. They didn't have the beds. So they had to triage and they had to say, sorry, your life is not worth what this person's life is. This person is 29 years old. They've got 3 little kids. You're 55. You don't have any family left. We're going to just let you expire because we don't have a ventilator for you because we have to put that person on a ventilator instead of you. So when you have extra ventilators and all that stuff, that doesn't mean that we overreacted. That means that we kept things under being overwhelmed. This virus would be insanely more deadly if tens of thousands of people couldn't get ventilators.
Well, it's exactly correct. It's exactly correct. And the influence of Kushner and the other people around Trump was just a disaster. On March 22nd, the White House said that there will be 27 million test kits available by March 31st. By mid-April, there were still only 4 million. On March 24th or 25th, the date is not determined, Trump floated the idea of terminating all social distancing and simply allowing the coronavirus to ravage the country. So
right.
Let's let it just burn through the country. And Dr. Anthony Fauci was appalled by that. He said that would result in a terrible death toll.
Right. And I mean, it's the whole herd immunity argument. But I just spoke with a guy this afternoon who, and this is anecdotal, so it's not evidence of anything, but he has a friend who got it twice. And there is, the last article I read from the World Health Organization was, there is no evidence that you build immunity once you have this.
because I had a brush with this stuff myself.
Okay.
And I had a low grade fever for a number of days, some mysterious chest congestion that I couldn't get rid of, exhaustion. If I tried to exercise, if I tried to do my workout, I felt like I was going to die, literally.
Right.
Um, and one of my friends who was fighting this said, don't try to do your workout. Don't do that. Don't exercise. It just will make it worse.
Right.
And, and it just killed me to do that, but I had to. And, I was having all kinds of issues, and it would wax and wane. It would intensify, and then it would go away. And finally, after many weeks, I got a test finally, and they said, well, negative. I said, well, what was making me feel so rotten for 3 weeks? It says,
Right.
it all depends on when you get the test. And we'd need an antibody test for you, but they didn't have one for me.
Right.
Well, anyway, on March 30th, Trump goes on Fox and Friends, which is another one of his North Korea level propaganda outlets.
Yeah.
He says, nobody could have predicted something like this. He was getting warned in January. Nobody could have predicted something like this. A month ago, nobody ever heard of this. Nobody had any idea, which is simply an outright lie.
Right.
He said that 100,000 dead in the US would be an indication of, I quote, a very good job. Meanwhile, there are state governors, including rural governors, whose states had supported Trump, were calling him and saying, where's the equipment we need? Where's the stuff we have to have? We need tests, we need medical supplies. Not happening. By March 31st, about 80% of the American people were on some form of lockdown. You'll notice it wasn't 100%, but it was almost 80%. He again, on March 30th to April 6th, during this period, Trump is trying to blame Obama for the lack of preparation, for the lack of testing. It's just insane. It's just absolutely insane. At one point, it says the faulty test for coronavirus was created during Trump's administration and by the CDC. And any problems were not Barack Obama's administration. As one person said, this is a professor of epidemiology, said, Trump is lying. He's lying 100%. He's trying to shift blame to others, even if the attempt is nonsensical. This is a new virus. He emphasized it. This is a new virus. And yet, the sad thing is a lot of people will automatically believe anything Trump says.
I think honestly, I believe it's a situation where they'll believe anything that they want to already believe, which that's been around forever, right? Like my little Johnny couldn't have done this thing.
Exactly.
That the teacher says he did. So like they've just done that with this guy. It is very cult-like behavior. It's strange. I mean, anybody with any sense at all could just spend 2 weeks watching this guy and he's contradict himself.
I know, and some of the stuff coming out of him is so insane. This obsession with hydroxychloroquine as a miracle cure. And I have a number of excuse me, I have a number of entries in April about him, Trump trying to push this. Now, April 11th is a sad day. South Korea's death toll, 211. United States, 20,294. We're at 85,000 now, and it's only May 14th. We were only at 20,000 on April 11th. We're losing 12,000 people a week.
Right.
We have the potential to have a 9/11 every single day by June 1st.
Right. Yeah. The numbers I think today were like almost 1,700 in a day. And I think the highest I saw was somewhere around 2,800 or 2,900 in one day. But I haven't paid attention every single day. You said something that was about him going on Fox and Friends. And have you seen it where he gets rambling and ranting where they even get uncomfortable?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
try not. I see the replays of it. I never watch it live, but I see
No.
replays of it. And even the three idiots on a couch, as I like to call them, they don't know what to say sometimes.
Right.
On April 16th, Trump said he was angry because no one told him there was an epidemic. No one told him. He had been told definitively since early January, perhaps as early as December. The next day, he's tweeting out, "Liberate Minnesota, liberate Michigan, liberate Virginia,"
Right.
trying to get his protesters to, break the stay-at-home orders. And
I think all he had to do was see protesters with his flag, and he was going to be on their side.
yeah, exactly. And some of this is AstroTurf too. Some of these protests are pure AstroTurf.
Right. Yeah, which meaning that they're fake, right? They're.
Yeah.
I've talked to someone who thinks they're absolutely like the same as the Russian bots. They're put together by, people like Putin who would want us divided anyway.
Well, the summary of what I would say with the timeline is that Trump didn't cause the virus. He did, and the Chinese didn't manufacture the virus. The virus is a completely natural event. Now, whether it escaped from a research facility, that does happen sometimes, has yet to be determined. Sure. But it wasn't manufactured as a bioweapon. It would be kind of insane to use a bioweapon on your own population initially. These things evolve all the time. I read a terrifying estimate that there's maybe 500 different species of this roaming around in China at any given time. US authorities, starting at the top, did not take this seriously. Trump was worried about the effect on the economy and how this would affect him politically. He did not take decisive action when he needed to. The Washington Post came out and documented that for the better part of 70 days were essentially wasted when things could have been done and should have been done.
Right.
And we could have avoided this. We could have been South Korea. Instead, we ended up being Italy and Spain. Even South Korea is starting to open up again, and even just a little bit of cautious reopening, they're starting to see more cases. I understand the economic impact. One of my stepdaughters has been laid off, and we're having to support her and her kids financially. I mean, I understand this.
Yeah.
I know what's going on. I know a lot of people are hurting, and I'm an older person, and I'm cut off from friends and going to visit people that I normally would, and it's difficult, and especially for the old folks, because they feel pretty isolated. But when I am told that it is somehow my obligation to put myself in danger for just to pump up the stock market again, that's kind of obscene.
Yeah, I wonder how much of the by the supporters, the push for trying to get the economy back rolling again prematurely is purely based on the whole, optics of how is this election going to look when the economy, when there's 25% unemployment and, all this is going on. Because I honestly I have way too many people on social media that I'm connected to. But I straight up have people, I posted the other day, guys that didn't have a job, they had no interest in a job 6 months ago, are posting all day long about open up the economy. You weren't even part of the economy 6 months ago.
Yeah.
You're really just rooting for a team. You know what I mean? And you're like, besides rooting for a team, you're rooting for a team 35, 40 times a day on social media. When the social media thing started up, I really thought it was terrific to be able to find people that I knew from my past, see how they were doing. I was so happy that, I came from a privileged area. Most of these people were doing well. Most of them had, started families, they had jobs. Everything was going pretty well for them. It was great to see that stuff. But it has turned into a cesspool of just blah.
I know.
I don't even hardly do the news feed anymore because it is just, and the problem really is that it's the most active people, they are super right wingers. And because they see that activity in their news feed, they think that they are in the majority. You are just a very, very, very loud minority.
Exactly.
And most people don't even want to see that shit to begin with. But my problem with them, which I have an issue with those people also, is, hey, assholes, start paying attention to something besides Honey Boo Boo. Because, you know what I mean? Like, you can't bury your head in the sand and just do whatever the fuck you're doing, because you're complicit in this situation. There is a dire situation happening in this country. It's been happening since the Reagan days, and it is the wealth gap that we've got going on between the very wealthy and the middle class. The middle class, you know what? I don't know if I'm even that concerned about the super poor. There should be a safety net for the super poor, but I'm not here to hold your hand for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So, but what I am concerned is the wealthy people seem to be the old, metaphor where the dog looks over the bridge, sees its reflection. The dog has a bone, so it barks at the dog and loses the bone. The wealthy people, the people who own Walmart, Amazon, all this other stuff, don't seem to have the foresight to see that if you destroy the middle class completely, your life will be destroyed as far as the income goes.
I think that's a fair assessment.
These people don't care about money anymore. They're so wealthy. What they care about is, do I have more money?
Yeah, scorekeeping. It's a kind of sickness. I should point out at this juncture that the coronavirus has disproportionately affected minority communities.
Let's talk about that though, because that's a real icky, and the media is culprit in this because they love to play that race card. It must get clicks and it must get views when you say that Blacks and Latinos are more affected and more killed by this disease. What they don't go into is, one of my favorite things to say is that, figures lie and liars figure. If you look at the socioeconomic background, I think you'll find that it affects poor people at a much higher rate than it affects people that have means.
Absolutely. And I would point out now that the virus is now beginning to spread to rural areas. And some of the increases in infection rates you're seeing are startling. Now, admittedly, they're starting from low numbers. But when you see a 500%, 600%, 1,000% increase in infections in an area, and I would point out the infections in the meatpacking industry, which have just been horrifying. There are some people, by the way, predicting a shortage of meat, perhaps beef, this summer.
Yeah, I heard beef and pork were very problems.
It's entirely possible. Out here in Kauai, we raise our own animals. We have our own beef and pork industry in Hawaii, but the mainland might see shortages of this kind of stuff. And this is now, as I say, beginning to penetrate into rural areas. Maybe that will get the attention of people. I would point out, by the way, that at the rate we're going, we should surpass 100,000 dead, probably around maybe May 21st, something like that. And we could be at 120,000 dead by the end of the month. The terrible punchline to all this is that we are being warned that round 2 is coming in the fall. That's the pattern of these things. They tend to recede,
right?
And then they come back.
Right. The Spanish flu reading that I did was eerily similar to the beginning of this. Now, will it be the same come fall? I don't know. There also is the happy talk, and I hate to repeat it because I don't know if it's factual. And like I said, even with the Spanish flu thing, the second wave in the fall was the deadly one. The first wave was very minimal. It seemed like a bad flu, no big deal. But that second wave, I don't know if it was after it mutated or what happened. but it wiped out. They estimate 20 to 50 million people on the planet.
In the United States, the death toll hit 650,000. You know, to give you an idea of how bad that is, if we had the same percentage of people die today of that, that would be about 1.9 million.
Yes, we did that. Me and my sons did that calculation. So
it was catastrophic,
yes.
Absolutely catastrophic.
And then you take into the equation the economic impact the second wave would have when it hits in September or October, and they shut the economy down. Here comes winter.
Yeah, and it's something I think needs to be said. And I mean, one of my friends was so critical. Says, "Well, you just hate Trump." I said, "Well, I said I do, but I have my reasons for it." And one of the things that's been most terrible and most destructive is anyone who contradicts him, even if they have studied these things their entire adult lives, they're being shoved aside. Anyone who doesn't make him look good is being fired, is being shunted aside. Everyone who is hired has to be basically one of his toads. And his toads really don't have very much expertise in anything except, you know, bowing down, you know, and filleting Trump.
Sure.
That's about the only thing they're good at.
Well, so the ironic thing in this situation is the voters that voted for Trump, a good portion of them voted for him because he wasn't a politician, and he, you know, he's not going to lie to you like a politician. And it turns out he's the greatest politician.
Yeah, I've known about this guy for years, and I've been trying to warn people for years about him. I got banned from Trump's Twitter feed in 2012.
Now, didn't they have to undo that now because?
No, they're supposed to, but I've never been allowed back on.
Oh.
But after the 2012 election, he was angry. Now savor the irony of this. He was angry because he thought Barack Obama had lost the popular vote. He didn't, but he thought Barack Obama had lost the popular vote, and he said that the Electoral College was just like an abomination. And then he said, and this is very chilling, he said, we should storm Washington. He was advocating violence.
Right.
And I won't repeat exactly what I said, but I let him know what I thought of that and what he could do with himself and what corner he should sit in to do that. Right. And I got banned from his feed. But he was inciting violence over the fact that the popular vote loser, he thought, had won the election. Now, isn't that ironic?
Right. Because, I mean, the last couple of Republican presidents all lost the popular vote.
I know. So anyway, I was determined to do a timeline of the coronavirus. I'm going to be adding some new things to it. I haven't updated it today. I updated a little bit, but there's some things I have to fill in. But I think it's an excellent job. I've garnered a lot of praise from a lot of people on this.
Right. I'm telling you, like, people that watch the podcast, you know, listen to this, and I'll have anybody who's going to speak credibly. If someone has a counterpoint to anything that's going on, let's hear it. I'm open to hearing it. I personally, so like Donald Trump himself, I don't like the rich kid that's been handed everything. They're not my favorite people in the world. Yeah. They, you know, generally turn out to be the spoiled brat, rotten, snotty kid kind of thing. But I don't, right when he got elected, I was like, this is going to work out well, I think. Not because he was going to be successful, but because he was going to be an abysmal failure. And I could stop at that point hearing about a businessman running the government, because the government and a business have almost nothing in common.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a business.
No.
And I wish people would understand that.
He's a terrible businessman.
He's one of the worst business people in American history, and I've documented that too. Since I'm retired, I have a lot of time, and I've gathered a huge mass of files about Trump's business losses. He's a shockingly bad business person. He's a total incompetent. His daddy left him the equivalent of over $400 million, and he lost it all. He has taken losses of over $1 billion on his taxes. These are little bits of his taxes that have been stolen or released in other mediums. He's absolutely atrocious on these things.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, anyway,
he knows how to cheat business very well. He just
oh
doesn't
yeah,
run it very well.
he has cheated all kinds of people in business, and some of the people he's cheated, he's actually driven to suicide, which some people don't know. But
Yeah.
he's a horrible person, and he's a horrible person to do business with. Well, anyway, I'm going to have to wrap up in a few minutes.
Oh, sure.
But if you have any other question you wanted to ask me.
I just have like some stuff that's like, you know, the Nazi in me almost at this point wishes, because like, so what was in the news today was that the Supreme Court in Wisconsin shot down the extension for the shelter in place that was going on up there.
Yeah.
And immediately all of the Wisconsin people are at the bar.
Yeah.
And they're sitting elbow to elbow. The ironic thing was these morons had masks on. And it is like, honestly, I think that the earth, or I don't know what it is, I'm not a religious guy, so I don't have like a, you know, God looked down and said to do this or any of that nonsense. But there almost needs to be a virus that has a, you know, way higher mortality rate, and it only kills stupid people. We have a plethora of stupid fucking people. Like you thought it was so important that you would go to a bar, but you also believe that it's a good idea for you to wear a mask at the bar, which you have to continually touch your face to pull down to drink a beer.
I know. It's just
dumb. I mean, you are going to you're more of a problem with a mask on at a bar. I mean, did you see the woman that cut the hole in the mask?
No, I didn't see that, but it doesn't surprise me.
He cut a hole in the middle of the mask because it was hard to breathe. And I'm like, have you lost your mind?
Yeah,
like,
they never had it.
No, so this whole thing, like I am, you know, I'm not being serious about it. I don't want anyone to die, you know, anything else. But for the love of God, we need to do something that is not. How are we producing so many stupid people? It is really staggering how dumb these people are.
They've been given a whole alternative information system, and they've been told not to trust anything except this alternative information system. And now we are seeing the consequences of it.
I have a scientist on the podcast to sit down and just explain the rigors of scientific method, because these people have used Google in a way that is completely backwards from that. They have a conclusion and then they Google the conclusion to find the conclusion so that they can prove that the conclusion is real. Yeah. Science is the opposite. You have a theory and then you do rigorous things to test that theory by putting things in there to come up with positives or negatives to debunk your own theory. And they don't do any of that. So like and they don't want to hear from anybody who has counter information. Yeah. And you know, this day and age we live in now where we have something called alternative facts.
Yeah. There's no such thing.
Right. That's not real. So
yeah.
There's facts. But,
well, but anyway, I wanted to thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we'll do it again sometime, hopefully with a camera.
I'm going to get a little camera for my desktop computer, and you'll be able to see just how old I actually am.
Well, we'll have a talk sometime because, you know, like some of the conversations that I like to have are with guys like you. You know, somebody that's a Republican or a Trump supporter would think that we, you know, have identical thoughts and all that. And we had a phone conversation where we absolutely do not.
No, I know. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
For me, I'd like to show people that, listen, you can be supposedly on the same side of one issue, but be on the other side of another issue. And then I could get maybe a Trump supporter come on and go, let's not talk about politicians. Let's talk about issues and see where we fall on issues. Let's micromanage this thing and see if we can't, because you're a history teacher. I firmly believe that we are not anywhere near as far as people think from another civil war.
I agree. I agree with that assessment.
Right. I mean, I'm gonna have to move to Hawaii because you're safe there. That's a pretty liberal place to be.
Oh, you'd love Blue Hawaii. It's expensive though.
Imagine, I'm sure, right? Yeah, I'm sure it's expensive too, right? And I'm a independent contractor. I don't have a pension to try and make it through Hawaii with. I can make it out there. But it was terrific talking to you. Hope to do it again. I will post this. If someone that's watching it that's friends with Joe, please subscribe to the podcast. I'll try and do more and better topics. I'll post it on social media with with you tagged in it.
I would love to do it again.
Terrific, sir. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Bill. Bye-bye now.